Question number 3, the Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr. Speaker, having caught it in his desk drawer. Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Finance, is it the government's position that a referendum on asset sales is unnecessary and that the election later this year will be the public's chance to make their views on asset sales known?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Finance, the government's position in this policy area is in fact in relation to the mixed ownership model which was pioneered by the previous government. It is the government's position that a referendum on the mixed ownership model is not necessary, and voters will have a chance to make their views known on that model later this year.
The Honourable David Cunliffe.
To the Acting Minister, does he think then that the public will be pleased to learn that without any mandate his government has budgeted $6 million to spend before the election on preparing to sell these assets, as his colleague Tony Ryle confirmed to the Finance and Expenditure Committee yesterday?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Finance, I'm sure that the public would expect the Government of New Zealand to take a prudent look at potential future policy areas, and they would also be very pleased to know that this government has saved multi-million times more than that in its alterations of waste in the public sector from the previous government.
The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr. Speaker, given that that is obviously a fait accompli, does he agree with Mr. Ryle's statement to the FEC yesterday that the government had no way of preventing the on-selling of individual shares to foreign corporates, but that the government would proceed with sale if re-elected regardless of that fact?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Finance, I appreciate the member's vote of confidence, but we don't think the election result is a fait accompli. Our view on this matter is that actually there will be long-term holding of these assets by investors. The sort of investors that are interested will include KiwiSaver funds. I know iwi are interested in investing. They're long-term holders of assets. The super fund obviously is a long-term holder of assets, and ACC is a long-term holder of assets, and I'm sure mum and dad investors will be long-term holders of those assets as well.
The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr. Speaker, can the Acting Minister tell a House how much he expects that middlemen and ticket clippers would cost the taxpayer if his privatisation agenda went ahead, given that in the Contact Energy sale alone, $32 million of taxpayers' money was spent in fees to consultants and bankers, and that officials yesterday told the FEC they estimate sales costs to be in the range of 2 to 5% of the asset value, which would be between $136 and $340 million.
The Honourable Stephen Joyce. Well, Mr. Speaker, I disagree with the member's question because it isn't a privatisation agenda. And again, in relation to the matter of fees, can I point out that I was talking to the Minister of Tertiary Education the other day, and the amounts the member refers to have been wasted many times by the previous government in the tertiary education area.
Point of order, the Honourable Rick Barker.
A point of order, Mr. Speaker. I would like you to reflect on the answer. The member asked about the cost. Essentially, it's about the cost of the transfer, and what we got was a reply that talked about whether or not it was privatisation and about tertiary education. The minister did not address the central theme of the question, which was to comment on the cost of sale.
The remedy for that kind of situation is very simple: to use language that is objective language. Had the member asked a question about the costs of the partial sale of shares to investors, I would have insisted on the minister giving a more precise answer. But when members load their questions with their view of the facts, I can't expect ministers not to respond if they disagree with that view of the facts. Supplementary question, the Honourable David. Point of order, the Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr. Speaker, I now seek your guidance. The word that I used, which I infer that you may be describing us in some way loaded, was the word privatisation. Is it your ruling, sir, that selling down 50% of a state asset is in some way not a privatisation?
I'm not involved in the debate at all. If the honourable member uses that kind of language, though, the ministers are likely to pick up on it, and I can't help that. Members, if they want to get to the nub of issues, keep the language as objective as possible, and I will help them all I can then. Does the member wish to ask a further supplementary? The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr. Speaker, I will repeat the question using other words. Can the Minister tell the House how much he expects the cost of sale to be, given that in the Contact Energy sale alone, those costs amounted to $32 million in fees to bankers and consultants, and that officials yesterday told the FEC that they estimate sale costs to be in the range of 2 to 5% of asset values, which would be between $136 and $340 million.
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Finance, I obviously don't have, and neither do officials know what it was going to cost at this point, because normally in those situations you have some form of competitive process for assessing the sort of fees that might be payable. But I can remind the member that both the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance have said in the House that they will be expecting a very competitive and the lowest possible price for such an activity.
Supplementary question, Honourable David Cunliffe.
Given that the Minister is apparently not in possession of the briefing which his own officials gave to the Finance and Expenditure Committee yesterday, can he tell the House why, given that only 8% of New Zealanders ever bought shares in Contact Energy and only 2.5% of them retain any interest in it now, what percentage of New Zealand families does he expect would be able to front up with the $4,000 that would be needed to keep their personal share of ownership at current levels in the strategic assets he is preparing to sell down?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Finance, I do not agree with the member's characterisation of the current ownership model, but I think he does touch on a very, very important issue, which is the importance of ensuring the success of the New Zealand share market and the growth story of this country, and the importance of ensuring the opportunity for New Zealanders to invest and hold assets and receive returns on those assets. And I sense that the member is very concerned about that, but I think the reality is that with the KiwiSaver funds, the ACC, with iwis now who have had settlements, and other investment funds, I'm very sure that they will want to invest and hold these long-term assets.
Point of order, Mr.
Point of order, the Honourable David
Mr.
Cunliffe.
Speaker, I seek leave to table advice from the Parliamentary Library setting out the proportion of New Zealanders who owned shares in Contact Energy and who do now.
Leave is sought to table that document. Is there any objection? There is no objection.